Hello, and welcome back to History Talk. Today we're going to be talking about how particularly Northern Ireland began to cause problems for itself. It's kind of a strange title, but yeah, thank you. And let's dive in. Now, hello and welcome back to History Talk. Today we're going to be looking at why exactly Northern Ireland had these problems, why exactly there was a need for the introduction for direct rule. So, first of all, in 1971, in August 1971, there is an introduction of internment. You see, after James Easter Clarke resigns as Prime Minister of Northern Ireland, he was protesting, of course, at the failure of the British government to provide security measures that he requested. He's replaced by Brian Faulkner. Now, Brian Faulkner will go on to show that he can understand there is a need for political, cooperation between Unionists, Nationalists, or rather Catholics and Protestants. But yet, he introduces a very controversial security policy of internment. Now, this is obviously a very, very stupid policy. You cannot tell people you can be imprisoned without trial and expect them to just accept that. Specifically because the police do not have covered information, and because of the lack of a trial, you have no real way of defending yourself. So if the police say, well, we believe you're an IRA member, you can go, no, I'm not, all you like. There's no way of defending yourself, and that means that a lot of innocent people land up in prison. Of course, this tends to actually benefit the IRA, because being locked up in a prison for a crime you didn't commit and then not being able to defend yourself for that crime. It's one thing to be locked up in prison for a crime you didn't commit, and then the state can turn around and say, well, if we didn't imprison you, then we wouldn't imprison guilty people, and you might be killed by a murderer, or you might be, attacked or assaulted by someone who does that. And however the way put it, so you can say that, a state can say that if its way of structuring things, if they say, well, no, this evidence would commit a guilty person. We're just putting you away because there's enough evidence against you. But if there is no evidence, there's no way to defend yourself, then that is only going to lead you down a path of this policy is stupid, and it actually is very detrimental. So, this policy, while being stupid, was a reaction to the trying to get a hold on the problems. Some of these problems would include the rioting that was going on around this time. Now, the aim was to end violence, but obviously, surprise, surprise, not that surprising, it had the opposite effect. Because, as I said, it's a one-sided operation, and when they introduced Operation Demetrius on the 9th of August, they arrest only those suspected of being the IRA. Yet, the IRA are not the only paramilitary group. And while, yes, the IRA is actually, there are multiple versions of the IRA. There's the real IRA, well, that's actually, but there's the provisional IRA, there's the official IRA, and there's all these different groups, there's all these different paramilitaries, but specifically, they only arrest IRA members. Or suspected IRA members would be the proper term. Because the opposition to internment leads to the worst day of violence in Northern Ireland since the Battle of the Bogside. On the 10th of August, an estimated 2,000 families in Belfast were forced to flee their homes. And from the introduction of internment until the end of 1971, 150 people die because of the result of this conflict. So, not the best policy. You might argue that, it should be obvious that wouldn't be a good policy, but clearly he couldn't understand the simple cause and effect thing. Anyway, so then comes a new problem. Because on the 30th of January 1972, a protest march is held against internment in Derry. However, this isn't rioting, this isn't forcing people to flee their homes, this is just a peaceful march where they're simply saying to the government, we do not want this policy, and they're trying to send them a message. However, the British Army are sent in. Now, the British paratroopers, they react to this protest in a very strange way. They shoot at people, at the protesters, and they shoot dead 13 unarmed civilians. Another victim later dies in hospital because of his injuries. And these events prompted international outrage. Because while it's one thing to see the RUC are racist, the RUC are, well, some people would say, well, racist, but Catholics aren't a race. But of course, there is no such thing as a other race. We are all one race. But we'll talk about that in a later video, But the point is that the RUC are, they wouldn't be the best to cooperate in political matters because they're very one-sided. But you'd think the British paratroopers would be, they'd understand. They're trained soldiers. The RUC are not trained soldiers. The RUC are police officers. But these are trained soldiers. These are people who are trained to shoot only when... The whole point is you do not lift a gun and fire at someone unless you think you are at risk. Because then you've killed them. It doesn't make any sense to kill someone if they're unarmed. And if you think they're armed, then why? And that's the problem. Because these are trained soldiers, why exactly would they do this? It doesn't make much sense. So, of course, it's not really defensible. However, you could say, well, maybe people would have reacted a little less violently if the British Army personnel who had done this had been punished or at least admitted their guilt. But instead, it is swept under the carpet and ignored by the British Army. And none of them are punished at the time. However, the problem is, people are aware of this. There's video proof, and there are violent protests all across Northern Ireland. There was a protest in Dublin, where protesters burned down the British Embassy. And you could argue, well, you can understand that their anger is fair enough. The British Army should not be firing on protesters that are, from just one area of government, which they do not, they should not have an opinion on because they are English, they're the English Army, and, why exactly would the English Army have a sort of a sign on that? Anyway, so, this leads to direct rule. British Prime Minister Edward Heath is convinced that Falklands government can no longer control the security situation. He introduced direct rule on 28th of March, whereby the Parliament instrument ceases to function, and Northern Ireland was ruled directly from Westminster. Faulkner resigns, and Heath appoints William Whitelaw to the new position of Secretary for State for Northern Ireland. And there you have direct rule, introduced due to British soldiers acting very strangely and in a racist fashion, which is strange because they're British soldiers, not RUC members, so why exactly would they do this thing? Which you can point to the problem of, what they're told, and the strange effect of what exactly are they trained? And of course, you have internment, which is the thing that sparks it all. A stupid policy, which, to be honest, from my point of view anyway, sounds stupid. I mean, maybe you think internment is fine. That's, I think you'd be wrong. But, that's that's fine. You can have your opinion. But of course, it's a bit like introducing conscription. Forcing someone to do something that is, possibly, fairly, what I'm saying is that it's one thing to let people have an unpleasant life. It's one thing to say, life is unpleasant. But it's quite another to make that life unpleasant. You can't exactly if you have a situation, if you've got someone, if you have 1,000 quid, and you can obviously, you can maybe, if someone is in need of money, you can donate them money. Yes, you can. Or you can't. So not or you can't. Or you just don't. Now you not doing that affects that person. That person doesn't do it. But at the end of the day, if you don't do that, that's, not as bad as if you set out, if you cause harm to others. And that's what when you see here. Because when you see internment, you see that the government is deliberately causing harm to people who they have no evidence on of really being part of paramilitary organisation. And then they don't arrest those who are part of other paramilitary organisations. And that will simply always breed problems. Even if it's fair, kind of, double-sided, all paramilitary organisations internment, that's still gonna cause problems. Because that's still a policy which is foolish. Because you'll always get innocent people in there. And you'll always most likely get more innocent people than you would if you gave them a trial. Obviously, you could argue, well, you'll get less guilty people. Because guilty people will be able to wean themselves out. Yeah. But putting people in prison without a trial is just not right. Anyway, you can join us next time. If you want to subscribe to the channel, that'd be great. And you can view other videos, That's also helpful. Obviously, when I say videos, I do mean videos and this kind of audio style stuff. So anyway, join us next time.